And here we go. All right, so we're going to, here we go. All right, so we're going to look at the new system. Get this. Get that out of my way. So we're good. All right, now, one thing I did find kind of weird about this is that in each of these chapters, they seem to, he wants to talk about the evolution of some of this stuff. I'm not going to put that. Look at my sheets here. I'm only going to hit the big things in human systems, right? So a couple of times I have a couple questions about the general animal stuff. I'm not going to worry about the evolution of these systems. I don't think I put a question on that. Okay, so don't worry about that. The little first page or two of the chapter, you can read through it. But I think one of the coolest things right off the bat here in this chapter is that every book you read about, and I just tell everybody in the very first lecture. So basically, each of these chapters is in one of our 16 systems of our body, and we're going to do these for about 5 weeks, and then we got the last week. I've got 2 ecology ones. I just do 2 weeks, two chapters 1 week, and then the next week is our final. And we'll do the same thing, and we'll have an online test, and I'll pick the questions like we did, and y'all come in at night and do that, or late afternoon, and then we'll have a written test over these questions. Okay, so the same thing we did. I think we can all be able to do what we did. Maybe get back together with your group or whatever y'all did, and let's make an A or B in this thing. Let's knock it out. Okay, and I think we've had a pretty good year, semester or year or whatever, considering the COVID mess. But this particular one is one of my favorite ones. And if you remember us talking about this early on last semester, there's still a lot of things in biology we don't know, right? Now we have not found any new elements in a long time. There are no more than 90 elements. We made some new ones, right, in chemistry. But there's some fields of biology that we don't know how we got here. We don't understand the evolution of humans and all that. That's still debatable. But in the human body, I mean, we have not found any new bones in like 150 years. Okay, there's no new muscles. You know what I mean? And the mysteries left in the human body or in animal systems is probably to understand how the brain works, right? We're going to get to that in a couple of weeks. Next week, actually, is something else that I'm already working on. The next week, 2 weeks from today, we'll talk about nervous system. So there's still a lot of unknown in how memory works, right? And how vision works. I mean, we just don't know. But I would say, throw that one out. The second biggest increase in knowledge in my 30 years of teaching is probably this chapter. So when I took this, I took A&P in 1983 at Northeast Community College. There was not a chapter in the book on lymphatic immunity. There was like 5 or 6, maybe 7 pages at the end of the cardiovascular chapter. And it would say the heart, all arteries and veins and stuff. And I know you haven't read that yet, but watch that, read that one. Watch that video. But then it would just be like an afterthought. And it went something like this. In addition to the cardiovascular system, there is another set of tubes that we always draw green in the book that are not green in you. You have no green tubes, you have no red, you have no blue tubes. Okay? But in pictures, we like to make arteries red, veins blue, because they carry, bright red oxidated blood in arteries. Veins have blue unoxidated blood, and green tubes carry excess cellular fluid back to the heart. Now, once again, there is a disadvantage of the way we're doing this. But if you had watched yesterday's lecture that I hadn't even posted yet, so it'd been impossible for y'all, or if you, and I know nobody in here has read chapter 32 yet, I bet. Okay, I wouldn't have had if I said yours either. But if you read chapter 3 real carefully, there's a pretty big, several pages talking about the exchange at the capillary bed. So in other words, real quickly, arteries, aorta branches down into hundreds of thousands of little bitty arteries. And at the very end of arteries, we have these very thin blood vessels called capillaries, so that our blood is never running loose in our body. We have a closed circulatory system, us and all the higher animals. So at these little bitty tubes, the smallest tubes we got, we do the exchange of nutrients. Like now, all the good stuff that we need at the cell is pushed out of the blood to the cells, and the cells put their products in the blood, okay, and their waste products and stuff, and then the blood just carries it back to the heart, to the kidneys, to the urinary system, to wherever it needs to go. Okay, so the capillary exchange is really cool. And to make a really long, complicated story real simple, let me explain how it works. On the capillary, the heart pressure pushes blood out, water out on the arterial side, and osmosis pulls it back in on the vein side. If you remember us talking about these, if you read through the chapter, it talks about there's a lot of plasma proteins made by the liver that help maintain osmotic pressure. And if you remember osmosis, water always follows the dissolved solids. So we have proteins in our blood that keep it, which pulls things back to it. And so the heart pressure pushes the blood out. Actually, I got a picture of that capillary bed right here, I believe. I thought I did. Hang on, let me look. I made this slide. Hang on. Thought I had one. Maybe not. And now here's where I'm going on a tangent. I don't have it up here. Okay, but at the capillary bed, and I don't have a picture of it, where the arteries turn into capillary beds, we do the exchange. Heart pressure pushes the water out on the arterial side. Osmotic pressure pulls it on the vein side. So it's kind of like having a bathtub filled up with water, but the drain is not as fast as the water's running in the bathtub. So what's going to eventually happen? It's going to overflow. And that's where this comes in. The lymphatic system catches this excess cellular fluid that we produce, and it gets carried back to the heart and dumped into the cardiovascular system. But that's a lot. If you've been in here for that lecture, if you've been every day, you'd have already heard me talk about that right now. It makes more sense. So I'm sorry, this COVID mess is kind of hard to do what I'm trying to do without not having a chance to look at it. So the first thing is the lymphatic system function is to carry excess cellular fluid back to the heart or back to the cardiovascular system. So these are all one-way tubes that carry that fluid back up to the vena cava and gets dumped into the right atrium. Okay? And for example, girls, when you're having your period, if your nose you gain weight or you get swelling, right? Because you're losing blood and your body's going, oh, I got to hold fluids, and you get swelling. So any kind of swelling in your leg or ankle or whatever is called edema. Right? And that is this fluid, that is this extracellular fluid building up. Right there it is. I did see that. So here's the artery, there's a capillary, and that fluid comes out and so much stays in here, so it gets pushed in these little lymphatic capillaries called lacteals. So I didn't see that. The picture was there. I didn't see it. Okay. But that's the purpose of the lymphatic system. And we didn't even know we had that. Like I told y'all, 30 years ago, it was 7 pages at the end of the chapter on the heart and blood vessel chapter. So the second note is this. A lot of the cells that do immunity hang out in these lymphatic organs. And so that's why these two are put together in every chapter now in any book being written. In other words, the other structures of the lymphatic system include lymph nodes, which are awesome. These are freaking ambushes for bacteria and pathogens to be filtered out of your lymph. This fluid, as it basically filters the lymph as it goes back to the heart. The spleen is a lymphatic organ that filters the blood for pathogens. It's full of B and T cells, lymphocytes, and it eats bacteria and pathogens out of the blood and kills it. So it filters the blood for pathogens. Okay? And then when I went to Ole Miss in '84, my first class said, please, by the way, when y'all transfer, do not wait to August to transfer. Decide where you're going to go. So let me give y'all bad news. All the good classes are full, and ain't nothing left but evil. So I go to Ole Miss in '84, and the first class I took was histology, which is a senior level, 500 level class, and I didn't need to take it because I ain't had regular physiology yet. And we looked at this, I fell in love with that. I ended up being the teacher's TA in a couple of years when I was in grad school. But I remember her talking about the thymus, which is this gland right above the heart here in the thoracic cavity. And she didn't know what it did. We didn't know what it did in 1984. We literally, I remember her saying, y'all gonna figure out what it does to get famous. But here's what I can tell you, is that this is what it looks like. We had a picture of it. And that little baby's got a big one. And as you get older, it disappears. By the time you get 60 or 65, you ain't got one. So I'm going to tell you what it does now. When we get to this today, in our specific immunity, those lymphocytes, which are the second most common white blood cell, they're divided into two groups, B and T cells. B cells make antibodies, y'all heard about, right? Not antibiotics, but antibodies. But the T cells go to the thymus from the bone marrow, and that is boot camp, training ground for the thymus T cells. So all your T cells made in the bone marrow go to the thymus, and they parachute out of this into your bloodstream for your entire life. And they do a very important function, and they kill cells that have been taken over by cancer and pathogens. Viruses and cancer, man. But one of the T cells we're going to talk about this morning is called the helper T cell. And what we now, after 30 years of studying this, can say is it is the main cell that controls the entire immune response. So this would be like the general, or I like to look at it like this. If your immune cells are all the first responders that respond when it's a car wreck on I-55, the helper T cell would be the dispatcher. When you call in 911, and then that person's going to go, I need 5 ambulances. We need the live. We need the daggone hazmat. These chemicals, people are melting. You know, it's a nuclear reactor meltdown, whatever. You know that, and that's what your helper T cells do. And why am I making a big deal about this? Because AIDS kills helper T cells. We knew that in 1985. So it took us 30 years. So in our attempt to find ways to treat AIDS, we have probably discovered mostly how the immune system works. And so today, in my AMP book, that's 65 page chapter, that didn't exist 30 years ago. So there's 65 pages of knowledge in your A&P book, and probably another 30, 40 pages in this chapter, right? That this chapter wouldn't have been the book 30 years ago. Is that pretty cool? So lymphatic system carries excess cellular fluid back to the heart, and along the way, these lymph nodes and other lymphatic organs defend your body. Okay? Is that fair enough? So lymphatic vessels collect this excess cellular fluid. It's called lymph. You carry it back to the heart. And by the way, cancer spreads in the lymph vessels before it really spreads in the blood. So we check your lymph nodes to see if cancer is spread from an organ that you have cancer with. Okay? Red bone marrow is where blood cells are made, including B and T cells, these lymphocytes. The thymus gland, we just said, is where T cells mature. So it's right here on the PowerPoint, right? That's their boot camp for T cells. Okay? And there's a nice picture showing all these organs. Lymph nodes then are these little structures along the lymphatic vessels that filter the lymph that contain monocytes, macrophages, and B and T cells, and they destroy pathogens in the lymph. Notice where they're located in the inguinal areas, under the arms and stuff, right? One of the worst things you can find is a swollen lymph node on your arm, right? If you do feel something like a BB or something maybe like a golf ball on your arm, the best thing you can hope for is it hurts. If it hurts and you feel it, it's tender, then that's probably just a real bad infection. But cancer usually doesn't hurt. It just forms, it's growing in your arm and it's not going to hurt. So if you do find a knot in your body and it doesn't hurt, you should go to the doctor and have that checked real quick, and they'll do a biopsy. Okay, so lymph nodes filter the lymph. The spleen filters the blood for pathogens. So it's kind of like the lymph node for blood. Okay, and it's really important. Now look, you can live without a spleen. People rupture their spleen all the time. However, how many of y'all know people that, I mean, and I always say this, I've said this before, but at conception, everybody did something, right? I'm just saying, I mean, nobody is perfect, right? Nobody, I've never met somebody that was a genius, who was a great athlete, who was also the best looking or smoking hottest woman ever on the history of Earth, right? If you got all three of them, you just hit the lottery of everything, right? I did have one person that was real close to that, but guess what her flaw was? She had the worst immune system I've ever seen. She comes to school every day. I mean, she was sick every day. I mean, I didn't food America. He's going to be miserable, right? Because she is sick every day. I mean, she just, so even with all these other things, she was brilliant, she was beautiful, she was straight A's, she's probably a doctor today, but she is a sick doctor somewhere. If you are sickly, you do not want to lose your spleen. I had a young girl one time I taught, and she was the sweetest person you ever seen. She was not major biology here. I mean, just an angel. And then 10 years later, she walks up in the A&P, taking some coming back to be a nurse. And every day she was just coughing and sniffing and just, shall I say, extremely not pleasant to be around. Okay. And finally, since we had known each other for like 10 years, one day, like spring, I just came up to her and said, look, I don't mean to be ugly here, but what happened to you? Something had to happen. Did some guy like just mess you over? Or what? I mean, something happened because you are not who you were. You were so nice and sweet, and now you're just really evil. You know what I mean? Not nice to be around. Not be nice. And she said, well, it started with my ex-husband. Okay, here we go. So she married this loser, but she also had a car wreck and the steering wheel punctured her spleen. And so she had her spleen removed because she was sickly. And she said, I've had intravenous antibiotics like 6 times in the last 12 years. I spent days in the hospital. Every time a little kid would get through, she'd end up in the emergency room. She'd get it. So her immune system was really compromised by losing the spleen. Now, if you're a normal immune system, don't worry about it. But if you're the sickly type, don't lose your spleen. Tonsils, we cut them all the time. These are lymphatic tissues in the throat. Pars patches, these are lymphatic tissue in the intestines, because food is contaminated a lot of times, and we got to have fibers right there where we suck food into our body. The appendix, I mentioned that, I think I made a question about that. That's kind of a weird one. The appendix now we have a function for it. We didn't have a function just maybe 4 or 5 years ago. It looks like the appendix is a little blind pouch in your large intestine where we keep some good bacterium. So when we have a storm come through like today, there's going to be tornado warnings, like another high school speed, this level 7 tornado warning. But for you, a storm in your gut would be real bad diarrhea. We've all had storms, have we not, right? Okay, so if you ever had an intestinal storm, it cleans everybody out. And what we think is those good bacteria come back out and receive your gut. A lot of research right now, this sounds kind of nasty. A lot of research is telling us that some people are healthier than others based on the bacterium in their colon. Maybe even some people are fat because of the bacterium in their colon. Are fatter than other people. I'm going to take full responsibility for my overeating, okay, for my obesity. But There is some people that have certain body types that seem like the colon bacteria may be a big deal, which is kind of wild. Saw a girl a couple years ago, a lady speaking on that. I was shocked at some of the things that she could tell. She could tell they were being able to predict how well people were going to take organ transplant, like knee replacements, based on the colon bacteria in their colon. Like, you're not going to have any trouble with this knee replacement. This person's probably going to have trouble. I would have never think to look at poop to tell me if I can take a knee replacement. Those two never come together to me. Right? Okay, check my poop to tell me how well I'm going to take a knee replacement. I'm like, what? So there's some weird stuff going on down there. Okay. All right. Here's the picture of the blood bone marrow. Here is the thymus that we now know is bootcap for T cells. Here is a lymph node with these. All those dots are monocytes and B cells and neutrophils, lymphocytes. And here is the spleen with those white and red pulp are immune cells filtering the blood for pathogens. Okay, is that pretty cool? So these are all the players. Okay, now let's dive a little bit deeper. Now, immunity then is the ability to remove foreign substances, bacterial pathogens, and cancer-causing cells in your body. Okay, we got two lines of defense in the animal system. We have these innate defenses. Now, innate would be things that are just always there, they're always do their job, usually, you know what I'm saying, but they're not specific. Let me give an example. And I'm going to use a bad one that y'all can relate to. Okay. Trump wanted to build a wall in Mexico, right? Between us and Mexico. That wall would keep everybody out. I didn't keep, anybody, keep a millionaire out, and keep a poor person out, you can't cross the wall, right? The wall was indiscriminatory. It was not discriminating certain people, right? So innate defenses are things that kill all pathogens in your body, and they don't care if it's the E. coli from breakfast or the STD you picked up last night when you went partying and had sex with somebody unprotected. Okay, all those are bacteria you can pick up, right? I'm just throwing it. I'm taking everybody away, but it don't care who you are. It kills everybody. Kind of like a wall. Okay, we're gonna look through these kind of quickly. These are kind of cool, and these include the blood cells I talk about, like neutrophils and basophils and monocytes. The neutrophils, the macrophages, and monocytes that eat people. These are our phagocytic blood cells that eat bacteria. So they eat bacteria, but they don't eat all bacteria. They'll eat everybody. They don't care. They're not specific. And we're going to spend probably 5 or 10 minutes looking at these. There's a whole bunch of these, okay? You would think this would stop it, but this does not do the job. So we have a second line of defense that's called adaptive immunity, and that is exclusively the B and T cells, the lymphocytes, the one blood cell. The second most common white blood cell is the lymphocyte, and it is divided into B and T cells, and they do adaptive immunity, and that means that they go and target a specific, the Robison E. coli that was on that toilet seat at McDonald's and I sat on last night. I'm going to kill it and all of its copies in my body, in Robin's body. So it specifically targets something to kill, a type of cancer or whatever, and that gets even more bizarre. And then after it whoops its butt, it makes memory cells so it'll remember if it ever comes back into your body and kick its butt before it gets a toe, so you don't get sick again. That's immunity. Like, for example, how many of y'all got chickenpox in y'all live? I got it in my hair, I got it in my ear, I got it in my butt crack, okay? I never got it again. My daughter ever got it. We all got on a bus one time on Friday for spring break, went to Disney World. We get to Magic Kingdom front gate, my girl broke out in full chickenpox. Everybody on the bus got chickenpox all the way home. And I went up there and asked the man, I speak to Mickey, bring Mickey out, I got to talk to some boss. And then this dude, Mickey didn't come out, but the head dude come out, and I said, look, we just spent $3,000. We're not here for a week. Look at this crap. He said, yep, she got chickenpox. I said, do I need to stay with her in the room? Me and my wife take turns to take the other kid and just burn this trip? And he goes, no, that's communicable disease. Here's fast pass. That's going to the front line, minimize exposure to everybody else. I said, thank you, sir. I mean, but I never broke out again because I had memory. So when you get a vaccine, you're getting something that triggers your first response so that you have these memory cells so that when you get the real COVID virus, you kick its butt and it'll make you sick. And I thought that this is exactly what's going on right now. And I got very disturbed too. Now I rarely get upset. I'm not upset at y'all, but I was just very disturbed. So when I'm finishing up my class on Tuesday, we're doing like respiratory something, nothing to do with the immune system, okay? And I just asked the group, I said, hey, and it's AMP students, which are people like y'all that are going to be scientists, right, or be nurses. I said, there's about 15 in the room. I said, hey, how many of you get the vaccine? Now that, y'all can get it back, everybody over 16 get a vaccine in Mississippi right now. My 21-year-old getting hers next week. My 28-year-old done got hurt. They got one of the two. And I asked, and I said, look, I'm not judging you, and I'm not going to be ugly to you. I'm just saying, how many of y'all plan on getting the vaccine? And I said, I just wondered, just be counting trivia. 2 people raised their hand. 2 out of 15. And I said, what's the deal? And they're like, I ain't worried about it. I said, okay. And I just stopped. I said, okay, look, I'm not giving bonus points. I'm not this, I'm not going to be unethical. I said, here's the deal. Would y'all like things to go back to normal? Would you like to go to a concert in your lifetime? Okay, I would like to do that very much in July. Please, I said, please get the free vaccine. It's free. Go get any of them will help, because we got to get 75%. Because you know we got 25% Mississippi. It's just crazy. Ain't gonna do it. Government, too many conspiracy people in the state, right? But we got to get the young people to get this vaccine, or we're gonna be toast. Because y'all are the ones transmitting, right? I had somebody in every one of my class almost every week has got COVID, you know. And so and believe you need to get it too. And I had a really good talk with a young man at my AMP class yesterday. One of my favorite students got it on New Year's Eve, and she's still not over it. She's lost all her energy. She's got the COVID syndrome thing. So if you've had it, I hope y'all okay, because a lot of people get there real quick, but there are some people, even young people, that are affected by it real bad. She's a runner. I can't run or anything now. It still hurting you. Okay, I'm so sorry. That's just, and you're a Northwest athlete too, right? So that's just hurt her big time. Yeah, and she also said she was having trouble concentrating. So she made like a 95 on every test last semester, and then she made bad on the first test here this time because she really not concentrating very well. So anyway, so please, y'all need to wait 90 days if you've had COVID to get this, but this will help you not get it again or not spread it too. But anyway, so we'll dive through a little bit. So let's look at some of these NAs real quick. The main one is physical barriers, chemical barriers, that acid and the pH of the stomach, and it kills a lot of bad food. Everybody in this room, we've all had bad food, okay? Y'all all had food poisoning, your stomach just killed it. You probably woke up a little bit, you're like, oh, a little something else, you know, or maybe threw up and it's over with. But that's big. Skin is a big one here. And I want to say some things, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings here. But the whole AIDS epidemic was a misuse of epithelium. Is this clear? People having anal sex don't need to be having anal sex, okay? If you want to do that, that's fine, but get up in a relationship, right? Because that organ ain't made for that, okay? And you tear, and the virus, because of AIDS, is in semen. So whomever receives the semen is getting AIDS, okay? That's girl or boy or whatever, okay? And that's where we spread. That's where it spread. And that's been the big problem there. And by the way, I'm not running anybody down. Homosexual population, these people got it together. They wear condoms and they get monogamous. They done buried all their friends in the 90s, and they got their act together. It's all the young people that are invincible that are still doing that. It's got quite dangerous. Okay, others, that's the phagocytic cells, that's neutrophils and monocytes. Another cell called natural killer cells are just in your blood, they eat pathogens. And then there's a whole bunch of proteins we'll mention here. Okay, so here we go. Here's the neutrophils eating bacteria. Here's a cut in the skin. Okay, the physical chemical barrier, she repeats herself a lot here. Inflammation is another one. That is when you swell up, when you hurt yourself, right? When you get stung by a bee and you cut yourself. Inflammation calls cells in to kill pathogens, and the swelling increases the surface area so we can have more battle soldiers go in there and kill. Okay, so inflammation is part of your natural defense. Here's a neutrophil, a monocyte eating 13 bacteria. This last one of these guys, bring them in and eating them, man. This is pretty cool sci-fi, but it's real. That's bacteria getting eaten by macrophages. Fever is a good thing. Oh, when I was a kid, every time a kid has fever, you give them Tylenol, right? Now they tell you let the fever run. Now, not the infant, but if you're 2 years old and you have a fever, let the fever run, because guess what? Bacteria can't take the heat in the kitchen. They get sluggish and can't fight as well, and our immune cells are like Jared Lawler throwing this thing down with his arm, or ripping his shirt off, then he's ready to whoop butt then. Like, come on. Am I the only one who watched wrestling at some point? Y'all know, nobody watched wrestling? Wrestling? No, Mississippi's called wrestling. Y'all know who Jerry Lawler is. You may know who Jerry Lawler is. Some of y'all ever heard of him? Y'all so sad. The rest of y'all need to Google this and type in Jerry Lawler, Bill Dundee, Tupelo, Mississippi concession stands. All I'm going to say, because I was there, and they got a concession stand and threw like mustard and ketchup bottles on each other and hit each other. Then they went and got in the car and went out and ate each other. The bad guys come out one door, and the good guys come out another door, and just one locker room. Anyway, it's fake. I if y'all didn't know that's fake. Fever, go. Neutrophils, eosinophils, macrophages, those are all those natural killers I already mentioned. Here's a weird one. You have a group of proteins, about 14 of them called complement made by the liver, and they bind to and kill pathogens. I call this the rat poison, right? Anybody ever put rat poison in a farm in their house? You buy a little box, throw it under the sink. Don't worry about it. Rats eat it, they take it back, and all their children bleed to death. It kills everybody. It makes them bleed to death. Now, if you eat it, you may die too, so don't eat it, right? Okay, just throw it under the bed, okay, and it kills all the rats. God made proteins in your body that just help destroy pathogens, and they're very bizarre. Here's another one, interferon. That's another protein that kills pathogens, and then all these immune cells, monocytes, eosinophils, neutrophils, basophils, helper T cells produce chemicals, and this is a big group we call cytokines, and these are chemicals that call other players in to fight and will help kill pathogens. And so we have bioengineered a lot of these today to give people for drugs. So cytokines are really cool. Here's just showing how they blow a hole in it, look, kill the bacteria. That's complement. Okay? Then he talks about this acquired immunity. So once you get a pathogen in your body, it takes 5 to 7 days for you to activate enough to kill it. And every pathogen, every cell in your body has markers on it, including Robin cells that say Robin. But bacteria have markers called antigens that your body recognizes that as a specific foreign particle. So antigens are anything can elicit B and T cells to activate them. Okay? So acquired immunity is once you get to like for example, you had COVID, you have acquired immunity now, you probably got a year or so where you can't get it again. But you probably should wait 9 days to get one of the vaccines is what they're telling us to do. My best friend, the doctor, I told you about, he got it right the Friday before he's getting his first shot on Tuesday of the next week. So he was really kind of pissed off. So he's still waiting for his 90 days to get a shot. Okay, so acquired immunity is when you get it and you have immunity. Passive immunity would be like giving somebody antibody shots or immunoglobulin shots. Lymphocytes are the B and T cells, right? And they're going to recognize these foreign antigens. B cells become plasma cells that make antibodies, which are very interesting little Y-shaped molecules. They look like this. See the little Y's right here? Get a pen up here. So these little Y-shaped molecules have 2 binding sites here and here, and they can bind to 2 bacteria, and that's how we glutenate blood if you give me the wrong blood type, for example. The whole blood type problem. So it glutenates them up, and when you basically here's the deal. That the Y sticks to a bacteria, and when you see a bacteria with a Y on it, it says come eat me. So literally they eat them. And here it's showing you how it works. So in adaptive immunity, look, you have the cell immunity, the T cells become cytotoxic killer T cells and helper T cells. They call everybody else in. And then B cells become the plasma cells that make these antibodies. So specific immunity includes both B and T cells. Okay, I'm going to pick up on this slide. What number am I on? I'm going to stop here. It's time to go. I'm going to pick up here and I'll video the rest of that for y'all. Okay. So very interesting, I think, stuff here. I like the wrong screen. Hang on. Y'all may go. Y'all can leave. Don't want y'all hang around any longer than you have to, but I don't know. I got locked out here somehow.